everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you. And due to The Matrix Resurrections being released shortly worldwide, which is the fourth film within the Matrix franchise, I thought it would be appropriate to look back and reflect on the first three films within the Matrix trilogy and talk about their overall impact and legacy during and post their release. So as per the title of this video, we'll talk about the first film and there'll likely be spoilers, so just beware when going into this overall video. Now, The Matrix itself was released in March the 31st, 1999, and it stars Keanu Reeves, Larry Fishburne, Carrie Ann Moss, Hugo Weaving, and it was directed by the back then Wachowski brothers. Now, the setup within The Matrix is that we follow the story of computer programmer Thomas Anderson in a seemingly present-day world where he's seemingly living a normal life and existence, but that existence is shortly to be changed forever when he meets a woman called Trinity, who eventually introduces him to someone called Morpheus, who makes a startling revelation towards Thomas Anderson, who also goes by the namesake as Neo throughout the rest of the story. Now, the revelation that Morpheus states to Thomas Anderson is that the world he's currently living in is not an actual reality, and through the choice of either a blue pill or a red pill, he can either accept the current life he's living in or really open up his eyes to the actual universe that he's really living in. Now, shortly after taking the red pill, Thomas Anderson realises that the reality that he's been living in is actually a simulated reality which was created by sentient machines and artificial intelligence to keep humans captive after a massive war between the humans and the machines in the future left the human population defeated. The remaining survivors take refuge in the underground city known as Zion, which is led by Morpheus. Now, the group of Morpheus have the facility to plug themselves back into the Matrix, and alongside Trinity they enter the world, rescuing all the humans that are trapped within the system. Now, when the humans enter the Matrix, they have to constantly battle against agents who exist to clear or eradicate any threats to the system itself. Now, as Neo, or Thomas Anderson, continues on this journey, he starts to manifest certain skills and powers, and over this development, Morpheus looks at Neo and believes that he is the one saviour who will ultimately free all of humankind from the rule of the machines. Now, when looking back at The Matrix, if we really think about it, it probably is the last truly original cultural movie phenomenon that we've seen, certainly within the last 20 years. Now, post its release, we have seen certainly equally culturally phenomenon films, so we are certainly looking at the likes of the Lord of the Rings films and maybe the first Avengers films as well. But in terms of a completely new concept and idea, The Matrix really remains the last of its kind, maybe since after Star Wars, where we have a film that not only tapped into the whole cultural zeitgeist of audiences, but it also shaped the way films were made in the mainstream entertainment going forward, certainly into the next decade or so after its release. The movie itself achieved this impact really on two fronts, the first being through its concept of people living in a simulated reality, tapping into those themes of what is reality, what is a dream, what is illusion, and these ideas will always entice audiences, and The Matrix really captured a whole imagination of viewers on those ideas in terms of science, but also in terms of both religion and philosophy as well. It really expanded on the concepts already established earlier with the first Terminator film from 1984, when we deal with the idea of humans eventually being destroyed by the very machines that they built, playing on that cultural paranoia of that eventual scenario that still bears a lot of relevance in today's climate. The Matrix, of course, is even more famous for its influence and impact in terms of visual effects and action cinematography. The Wachowski brothers fully admitted that there are huge influences on this movie, especially from anime and cyberpunk science fiction, the most obvious examples being Ghost in the Shell, which too shares the same ideas and discussions in terms of consciousness, and also the concept of beings being plugged into a certain mainframe or system. There's also a huge fusion of martial arts and Hong Kong action cinema, very reminiscent of the iconic Bruce Lee movies, along with the more balletic, violent nature, certainly of the John Woo films that we saw particularly from the late 80s and early 90s. And no doubt about it, The Matrix was truly revolutionary, with its multiple scenes of its lead characters dressed sleekly and stealthily in black leather costumes. We had all of those huge sequences of characters jumping and running on walls, pirouetting and somersaulting in different angles, all in slow motion as we see all of the frenetic carnage surrounding around them. All of those slow motion shots of people leaping from buildings, helicopters exploding, smashing into windows. It truly is awesome to see, and very much so when you are watching this film for the first time. The most distinctive feature of all of the cinematography was, of course, the iconic bullet time sequence. This is the scene where we get a 360 spinning shot of Neo leaning back at an impossible angle, dodging all of the bullets surrounding him. And let's be honest, the technique of the slow motion bullet time had already been seen previously in Blade in 1998, which also introduced some techniques that we'd seen already previously, but The Matrix really maximised this whole bullet time effect to a whole new level. And I could vividly remember at the time when the trailer released and all the hype and discussion amongst its emergence, where people were really captivated by this overall sequence. It truly was groundbreaking and really opened up a lot of eyes and gave a lot of inspiration how exactly the true physics of action could be visualised on a big screen. We then talk about all of the cast and the three lead performances: Keanu Reeves, Carrie and Laurence Fishburne. They all perform adequately enough within this film. I wouldn't say there's anything particularly distinctive or special about their performances, but of course now post this release and the overall legacy of the franchise, all three actors have become hugely iconic and synonymous with their roles. Now in terms of the first movie, the most significant performance is Hugo Weaving's villain in Agent Smith. For me, one of the last truly impressionable original screen villains that we've seen recently in mainstream cinema. He's so articulate and politely spoken, almost to an impeccable level, but at the same time he also carries that huge amount of menace and intensity. There is a certain hidden dark charisma despite the almost monotone fashion that he delivers his dialogue. It's also a major shame that Hugo Weaving will also not be reprising his role for the fourth film, which was down to scheduling conflicts as well. But as I said before, one of the last really truly iconic screen villains, certainly within the 90s mainstream cinema. So if I had to give a score for The Matrix, I would give it an 8.1 out of 10. As I said before, truly great and groundbreaking effects and concepts. Very rare for a film to be equally outstanding and influential, both in terms of its visuals and also in terms of its overall concepts and storytelling. Now we could criticise the movie for maybe lacking a certain heart or emotion, but I think in terms of the overall concept it's really not as necessary. This is very much of a more concept driven film rather than a character driven film, and I think the lack of certainly an emotional weight helps keep the film far more lean and fast paced, and there's plenty of other elements to keep it exciting and engaging without getting too much bogged down by any love story. So on to the movie's release, and despite being seen as a major financial risk for Warner Brothers with a $60 million budget, The Matrix managed to surpass all expectations and would go on to gross over $466.3 million worldwide at the box office. It was highly praised for both its high concepts and groundbreaking effects, and it also managed to win 4 Oscars for Best Film Editing, Sound, Visual Effects and Sound Editing. And I think when we look back on The Matrix, I think it's overall a very much of a big lesson in terms of mainstream filmmaking, harking back to the times when studios were prepared to take far more of a risk on original and new concepts with new characters. There's always been that never-ending debate that in the current climate that we are in now, with the emergence of streaming platforms as well, that fans are becoming too illusioned by seeing all of these iconic characters and franchises constantly being rebooted and reimagined. But the first film is a reminder that all of these franchises have to start somewhere. There has to be a ground zero moment. There has to be that point when nobody knew who these characters were. There has to be a point when certain ideas and concepts do have a certain risk about them, and the studios have to have a certain confidence in seeing those risks fully realised. Now of course, in terms of the legacy of the first film, it did spawn 2 hugely successful though inferior sequels in both The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, which are both released in 2003, and I will shortly provide a review of both of those films. But as I mentioned before, the true lasting legacy of The Matrix was really shaping the whole dynamic of the entertainment industry, really opening up a new wave of how action cinema could be visualised in a more dynamic and creative fashion. And it still remains by some distance easily the best of the Matrix franchise and easily the best films from the Wachowski brothers as well. So a truly cultural phenomenon and iconic film in the first Matrix movie released in 1999, and I think even now post its release it still remains a very lean and exciting science fiction film with very thought-provoking concepts, and it manages to merge both those elements very well for a truly mark piece of cultural entertainment. So those are my thoughts and feelings and review on the first Matrix movie released in 1999. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How do you think it compares to the other two? Do you feel it is indeed superior to the other entries within the Matrix trilogy, or do you feel that somehow the second and third films equally match it or even surpass it, and what are your hopes and feelings going ahead shortly to the overall release of The Matrix Resurrections? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I have provided some commentary of the first 2 trailers of The Matrix Resurrections, and I will leave the links for both of those within the description. And as I mentioned before, look out shortly on the channel for reviews on both The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions as well. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.